All right, welcome to the next NSP Timer webinar. Today we're going to be covering driving the reader, the config.ini file. Basically, the config, the reader itself does have configuration built into it, but it serves us no purpose. It's basically just loading from the online storage within the reader. The config file, whenever the reader turns on, it actually searches that's the SD card and looks for the config file to load, and that's how it determines the various settings and things like that. Before we jump into the config file, I do just want to show real quick the files that you can expect to see inside when you open the SD card inside the readers, whether you're connecting via the micro USB on top of the reader, which we'll cover in our next webinar, or if you're taking the SD card out and inserting it in. So when you open a reader file, you should be able to see my screen now. There's going to be 4 files into it. There's only 3 in here because we only saved 3 of them after the race. There'll be the filtered file, the raw file, and the status file, in addition to the config file. What these are, so status is literally just what it is. It provides a status update every 10th of a second, I think it is, on what's happening with the reader. So this is, we'll only go into this whenever we're reviewing any issues or any data. I mean, you see there's all kinds of information that gets dropped in here. So we can see temperatures and things like that through the status file. The raw and filtered files are the same type of files. Trident does an initial filter. So the raw is every single read that comes into the system. So this right here is actually what a read looks like when it comes from Trident. This is an encoded message. I've actually got a tool that can decode this, but it's something to the effect of chip information goes to about here, and then time, date, and some other post information back here. So this is every single chip read that this particular reader got for this event. And then there's every now and then there's a status with the correction based on the GPS time. The filtered file is very similar. It just provides a little bit more information. This one actually has some temperature settings and things like that in there. But this will show the unique reads and the temperature, battery settings, if it's charging, GPS, whether that's connected and such, and then all the reads, but filtered out a little bit. It doesn't take every single millisecond. This is the file that we import into RM if we need to import directly from the reader. So we'll go over that later. So that's the other 3 files. Today, what we're talking about is the config file. And the config file, to share a different window. When you open it, it opens a text document or a notepad document. And it looks like this. This is the raw information inside the config file. Anything that's after 2 brackets is just a comment. So anytime you see the 2 brackets, there's a comment after. And then they kind of have it broken out in these various sections for the different things that the config file drives. This is not generally how we access the config file. RM has a really nice, it has a nicer interface for us. So what we can do is we can actually open RM. Actually, I'm going to share this whole window so you can see everything I'm doing. So inside RM, to open the config file or get to the config file utility, we'll go to Utilities, Trident Settings. Of course, the window opened on the other screen. We're going to load, and then I have this just in my downloads. So when we load that file, this is what we'll see. So it's basically all the same information, just broken out a little bit nicer and easier to actually update. The way we handle this information, So system name, Ryan and I have decided to use this to denote what mode the reader is set in, if it's going to be for a remote send, and the event ID. Ryan, do you want to go a little bit more into that naming convention, just to kind of explain how you do that, so they, when they look at it, they understand what they're seeing?
Yeah. So, oh, sorry. So basically, I mean, it's going to have the mode there, so you can see this one is just start finish. That'll be finish, start, split, whatever it is. After the dash, you'll see we've moved to a 5-digit code now. The first digit will be the lead number. So 1 for Tony, 2 for me, 3 for Tasha, 4 for Linda. And then after that will be a date code. So this one now would be 10712, which would be Tony timing a race on July 12th. So
okay.
Pretty self-explanatory there, yeah.
Yeah, is that so you can kind of this system name, when it shows up on the screen on the reader, that'll kind of, like I said, give you an indication of where it should be and what the event ID is. The company name is really just our identifier for the reader itself. The new hybrid readers that have both UHF and DF will also denote which configuration file is loaded into the reader, whether it's UHF or DF. Because it's 2 different config files, because there's a few different settings for dual frequency versus UHF. Reader ID, we don't really use these. These can be any letter combination, or any letter you want, single letter A through Z. They're all default set to B, so we don't really use reader ID for what we're doing. We identify them in the company name. Time zone offset, so all the readers operate off UTC time. So we go in and update which time zone they're in. So our East Coast readers are all on -4 right now. All of our Central readers are on -5. All of our West Coast readers are on -7. In about 2 weeks, we're going to have to change all of those due to daylight savings. So Ryan and I will load all the SD cards, and we'll just go in and change the time zone offset to, so for us, we'll be -6 here in Houston at that point. And the fun thing is that happens on a Sunday, and we have races on Saturday and races on Sunday. So we're going to need to make sure we do it in between the races. The SMTP server, this is just a online server that it pings to get the GPS time. I've never updated this. This is the default that comes out of the box with the Trident readers. GPS autocorrect limit. So this is where you set whether, and if you notice, if you hit the edit button, it'll give you a little description in here too. If you set this to -1, this will make the reader automatically connected to the GPS to update its time automatically. So you don't have to push a time. So sometimes you notice when you turn the reader on, the time and date are just wrong. If you give it a minute or so, with this set to -1, that should update without you having to plug it in and push the updated time. Some of these other ones, some of these next ones we don't touch. So read rate constant. This one we don't touch. It just smooths over the time values. So basically, it accounts for any offset as it's coming in. We don't need to do that. Statistic log. This creates the status file for us, so we keep that turned on. These next few, we don't touch any of these. These all have to do with the antenna settings. Antenna settings remain constant. They're tuned from the factory. This is just if we had to basically implement a different style of antenna or a different set of antennas, that we would have to go and start modifying some of these. Tag timeout. It's just basically how long do you want to get reads in a row before it says, okay, I'm done getting reads for this tag. We have it set to 5 seconds. That time, it doesn't really impact what we're doing, so it's just kind of the default setting, and we leave it there. Activate relay. So in next week's webinar, we're going to be covering the reader itself. There are some relay points on the reader that you can plug in separate hardware. This will activate that relay whenever a chip goes over it, so you can trigger something else happening. If you have, I think downhill skiing, they use photo cells for the finish time. So what would happen is you have a antenna set up, it collects the read. When that read collects within the reader, it activates the relay, which activates the photocell, which gets the actual finish time for them. So the RFID is just used for this is participant number XYZ, and then the photocell is what actually like captures the time. Beep on tag, we always have this on false, because if not, it'll beep every single time a tag is read versus just the first time a tag is read. Filtered, these next ones, we don't use triggers or anything like that, so we don't use any of these. The actual IP address of the reader is set in the config file, so we update these ourselves. But these don't change once we set them, because this is basically what we use to identify the reader, the last 3 digits of the IP address. The subnet mask, this has to always be the subnet mask. This has to always be the gateway, because that's how it connects to the network whenever you're connecting it to Nighthawks or anything like that. All of our network in a boxes are set up to be gateway 192.168.1.1. So this is what drives, it makes the reader able to connect to that. DNS servers, status logging ports, these don't change. They've just, we don't mess with any of that stuff. That's for more hardcore configuration stuff. The readers do have a built-in router. We've never used it, but you can actually connect to the readers through a wireless network as well without using a wire. It's not a very stable connection from what we were told when we first bought them, so we've just never implemented or used any of the router capabilities within the Tridents. Power, these are always set to 33 for UHF. Honestly, I don't know why. It's just that's the standard, and it's just always stays there. For DF, we do have various settings, so we'll have low, medium, and high settings, but it goes from 33 to 35. So it's not a range that particularly matters. This section right here is depending on what type of reader we're using. If it's a hybrid reader like the dual frequency UHF readers or just a standard UHF, this would just say UHF 8 for those readers. The different activation modes for the antennas, again, we don't touch any of this stuff. It's just we've never had any issues with the default settings, so we've just never needed to touch it. But if we wanted to set up, specify which antennas we wanted to use, if we only, if we knew like maybe number 4 was out and it might be causing interference issues with something else, we could set it to use only 1, 2, 3, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Once we get down to this next section, all of this is used for our remote send readers. So when we connect a white box to them, and then we send the data up to the RM API. These are the settings that we use for this. So we have the username, password. We don't use an FTP server, so we don't need to use either of these. HTTP logging enabled. This is that screen that we're looking at when we're doing remote send. When it says if it's enabled, we're looking for the true. This is the first true that we're looking at, is if the logging is enabled. The second true is when it's connected using these 3. The transport, so there's 2 options here. One is using the Ethernet port like we do, or the readers do have a built-in 4G SIM card. The reason we don't use the 4G modem built-in, you have to supply your own SIM card. The reason we don't use the built-in modem and use an external is because, number 1, the built-in is a 4G and our Nighthawks are 5G, so we get faster network connection with our Nighthawks. And 2, sometimes it takes a really long time for the internal modem to connect. Like you might wait for 5, 6, 7 cycles through the screens before you see that it's connected. So that's why we've just defaulted to going with the Nighthawks. The HTTP connect string, this is the string that is sent up to the RM API that tells it which read it is. So as you can see, this reader is set on start finish. This is the event ID. This is our organization ID. And then these are standard for RM. So to edit this, we go in. You can't edit the organization ID because that's set by default. The event ID we would change right here. The mode we would change right here. So here's all your options that are available for modes. And then we don't mess with the query parameters. It's always been R equals 151. I've tried to get information on if there's any other potential options there, and everybody just says leave it alone, don't mess with it. So it stays R equals 151. And then the server address, this is just telling it we're going to api.rmtimingsystems.com, and then this is what it puts after it. So that's what it actually sends up to the API. So the only thing that you would ever really need, there's two things that you would ever really need to potentially mess with in here. A normal event. Actually, normal event, you would never do it. On a slightly abnormal event, there's only two things you would mess with. One is this HTTP connect string. And for that, when you hit the edit button, generally that would be just changing or updating the event ID and changing or updating the mode. And once you do that, you just hit apply and it's changed. The other thing that you might have to change is twice a year we have to update the times. If you happen to have an event on the Saturday of the time change and the Sunday of the time change, you'll have to update the time at the in between the races. We'll let you know what number it needs to be set to, so don't worry about trying to remember UTC offsets. Once you make any changes that you're done making your updates in this interface, you would just hit the save button and then go to that, just click on the config file that you're updating, which usually it'll be on a external USB drive listing here, and just hit save and override it. And then once you close it out and eject the reader, the reader will reboot, and it'll reboot with the new configuration file. So that's everything you need to know about the configuration file. Since we have a couple of minutes left over, I do want to talk about the RM API. So the RM API on all of your timing laptops, in the bookmarks bar, there is an RM API hot link up there in the bar. So you click that and it'll take you here. Password should be saved and you just log in. Once you get into the back end, you're going to see several things, but the only things you really would ever be concerned about would be your online event storage and your output files. Ignore the name of output files in this section of the website. This actually had Ryan confused. He was using an incorrect output file and it was causing himself a lot more work than he needed to. These are the reader output files when you are sending to the RM API. So when we have a modem connected to the reader, these are the files that get sent back. And the reason we have our coding for the event ID is because we can get a lot of information about this particular reader from the event ID. We know that Linda was using this reader at the finish on, well, the 1 and 0 are backwards, but it should be 1027. Oh no, this was a finish. Sorry, yeah. So finish readers we don't set up with the correct event ID because we don't want those coming in via the API. We just set it up with the reader API. So this was Linda and reader 127. Is that correct? Yeah. So Linda with reader 127. So we can go in.
That was my finish.
What was that? Sorry.
It was my finish. 127 was my finish box.
So if you click on this, it'll download the actual file, and this is what the file looks like. She was using dual frequency, so normally this would be using UHF. This would just be the bit number, but she was using dual frequency, so it was using the chip number. But this chip came in this date, this time. Here's a kind of cleaned up time, and it was a finish. So that's simple enough. If you go look at the video that I sent earlier this week, I actually showed kind of a cool hack of using the replay function in this area. So those of you that weren't in the chat when I sent that email, I will link that video because it's on the YouTube channel as well in this meeting invite, so you can check that out too. So yeah, we actually got a little further than I wanted today. So good. So that's the RM API. This is what's happening on the, or what you see on the back end. I can actually go in and watch a race happen here as well, because this shows me how many reads came into that reader, when the first read was, when the last read was, how many unique. So I can actually sit here and refresh this page while races are happening and be seeing the information that's coming across to you live, real time. So kind of cool. Feel free to mess around on the RM API website. There's some cool stuff in here. There's even some help videos and things like that. Feel free to look around and do whatever. Just try not to delete anything, because we try to keep all past records. But yeah, that's all I have for today. So before I stop recording, does anybody have any questions they think might be pertinent to anybody that will be watching this later?
So I did just want to add one thing, Tony, on the HTTP connect string when you're modifying it inside RM. The nice setup there that he had on his, where it had the drop-down menus, not all of the boxes are going to have those drop-down menus. Some of them you actually have to type in the connect string.
Not if it's on firmware version 296.
Perfect. Never mind.
Yeah. So we've got all of our readers
Beautiful.
on 296 now.
Cool.
Well, all but one, but we'll ignore that reader. Anyone else? Okay. I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording. Thank you guys for coming, and we will talk to y'all soon.
Tony, I do have a question.